Captain John T. Fallon, United States Army, World War II. I interviewed John back in Cape May Court, New Jersey, South New Jersey, back in 2009. It was actually January 9th, so he lived to be almost 100 years old. He passed away in 2021, but he's at late 80s when I interviewed him. But just a great guy. I love this guy. He actually helped liberate some of the concentration camps, and he's featured in my film Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembered. One of the liberators, the GIs telling their stories about liberating the camps. He was around Dachau. But John was with the 36th Combat Engineer Regiment. He enlisted in 1942 in the military and was active duty throughout the European Theater of Operations. He actually received 2 Purple Hearts for his wounds in World War II, one at Anzio, Italy, the other in France. He also fought in Germany, North Africa, and just amazing man. He just tells a great story. You're going to like his story. So I'm just so proud to be able to share it with you today here on the Voices of History YouTube channel, and it will air on the radio station Voices of History Radio when it's done here. I want to thank SK Offstat and Sean Johnson. You guys, thank you for stepping up. Thank you for helping me to share these stories. You guys have been real instrumental in my work, and I want to thank both of you from the bottom of my heart. And I hope you had a great Christmas, and God bless you. Looking forward to working with you in the new year. Amen. Okay, folks, let's honor Captain Fallon. Like I said, he's been gone about 3 years, lived to be about 100 years old, just one of these unsung heroes of World War II. And we need to remember these stories, these World War II stories. This is the foundation of where we're at today. I know a lot of us want the Vietnam stories, and I love them all, and I'm going to continue interviewing them this year, more Vietnam vets into next year. And but the World War II stories and the Korean stories, those are my first love of my work. So, and most of those guys are gone. So we're going to honor John today right now. I would invite you to share this story. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done that. Just help me with honoring John Fallon today, Captain Fallon. So God bless you.
I'm 86 3/4.
Wow. What year did you go into the military?
1942.
Were you drafted?
No, I enlisted shortly after Pearl Harbor.
Tell me where you were on December 7th, 1941, and what you remember about the Pearl Harbor attack.
On the day of the Pearl Harbor attack, I was sitting listening to the Eagles play Washington, and they lost. And they interrupted the program, the radio program at that time, and said that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. And everybody knew it was going to happen because papers were full of the Japanese for weeks before that.
Remember what they were saying, like the Japanese are getting ready to do something? Or?
Well, as a matter of fact, I kept looking at all the maps. The maps were in the paper all the time. And I looked at the map, I said the nearest American base to Japan is Dutch Harbor, Alaska, and they will probably hit Dutch Harbor, Alaska. Now, I was off by about 2,000 miles when they hit Pearl Harbor. But everybody knew they were going to happen. It's going to happen. Everybody except down in Washington.
So now you went into the Army?
Yes.
Where was your basic training at?
Well, I went to Camp Edwards for basic. I joined the Engineer Amphibian Command because I thought that would be great. They were training for making landings, and they had the landing boats, and you had to have some kind of expertise, which I didn't have, but I knew the semaphore code, and I thought that would work out in there. But I I went up to Camp Edwards and I finished the basic training, and then I went to OCS.
What was your MOS? What was you were an officer?
And as an enlisted man, oh, I was a signalman, but I don't know what it was.
No, I don't need the designation.
I don't really know what it was. I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
No, that's what I enjoyed. I enlisted. I never did it. After I was out of OCS, I was out of the basic training for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, waiting for a class to open in OCS, and I guarded landing boats all that time. That's all I did.
At what point did you go overseas?
When did I go overseas? Late that year. After I got out of OCS, I wanted to go back to the amphibian command, but that had been been disorganized by the Navy. They wanted to do all the landings themselves, so I joined an Army combat engineer battalion in Camp Carson, Colorado.
Oh, great.
And I went from there to, almost immediately went to maneuvers in Louisiana. And then I went back to Camp Carson, and I no sooner back in Camp Carson, Colorado, when they apparently needed some new lieutenants over in Europe. So I went from place to place, finally wound up in Camp Patrick Henry, and then took a ship over to Casablanca. I landed there after the original landing. I didn't make the landing there. And then I went through numerous schools. They had bridge schools and mine schools and all kinds of things that engineers should have. And fortunately, they also sent a lot of us to young lieutenants to a British school, which we called a commando school. It was run by a British commando. And I think they called it something battle, something school, whatever it was. And that really taught us what we really needed for the fighting. As it turned out, I needed very little of the engineering training because we spent most of the time as infantry anyway.
Mm-hmm. So what major campaigns were you involved with?
Well, I was in the Naples. I got a campaign ribbon for Naples, Foggia, and then I went right to Anzio and joined the regiment at Anzio. And they were
wounded there?
Yes, but I got through almost. I joined them in early February, and went through March and April. Towards the end, I got wounded just the day before the breakout. We spent almost the entire time there as infantry, not as engineers, and from that time on, I think that's what they decided we were going to do. So we went from when I was wounded, I went down to Naples for 3 months. I was in the hospital, and I come out of there just in time to go back to the where they were getting ready to go to France, and in 3-4 days we sailed for France. We went and landed in southern France, and that was pretty easy landing. Anyway, we went back into infantry work shortly after that.
What about D-Day? Were you involved with that?
As a matter of fact, that's a sore point with most of the fellows that were over came up from Africa, because they were in 4 D-Days before those fellows in Normandy landed.
Well, traditionally, I know you think of D-Day, you think of June 6, 1944, but Iwo Jima had a D-Day, all major.
I have to ask you which D-Day. You know,
let me rephrase that. Where were you on June 6, 1944?
I was teaching my platoon how to identify Japanese uniforms on a hill in Germany.
Okay. Were you in combat during any of this time, Anzio or any place?
I was in combat all the time.
Okay.
I had they called it, when all the fighting got so bad in Italy, in Anzio in the beginning, we lost an awful lot of people. And so when General Truscott took over the 6th Corps, he said that every combat company had to designate a patrol and reconnaissance platoon to do all the patrolling and the outposting. And their other companies were to maintain the main line of resistance till the new men got blooded. And it stayed that way for the rest of the war. Did most of the patrolling for my company, and we were in infantry combat, I would say 65 to 70% of the time. That's all the way through, all through the Alsace and Rhineland, and it was very difficult.
Tell me
I got wounded again in December.
well, can you tell me give me a combat story? I mean, what was maybe the most difficult situation you encountered in combat?
Well, I was in a few of them, but I think maybe when we tried to make a breakout from Enzio, we knew that the Germans were slowly pulling out, and I was called to regimental headquarters, and I was told to take my platoon and to head south to join. Actually, we was going to try to meet up with the 5th Army coming north, and I was told to take the platoon out, and the colonel says they've pulled out, they're going. I figured if they're going, I don't know why I had to take the whole platoon. Why don't I go out in a Jeep or something like this? But I didn't really trust them. But I left one squad in our outpost line, and I took the other 2 squads. And we got out pretty far. We got out to the German main line of resistance, and we got past their outpost line. There was nobody there, so we thought we were headed south, and we got blasted pretty hard with a lot of machine guns. And at that time I got wounded. I took one squad around the right to attack one machine gun, and I sent one of my best sergeants around the left to get the other guy. And we were getting very close. In fact, I could see where the machine gun explosive was knocking out the leaves. I was very close to him. And I looked up, something come over my head, and it landed in back of me, and it was a grenade. And I woke up in the battalion headquarters. My other men got one of the machine guns, but the other fellows got me back. We had one or 2 killed and several wounded. But they broke out the next day, as a matter of fact. I wasn't around to see it. But the very day after that, my company sent out, my platoon, my regiment, I'll get it right, sent out an entire company, and they went south and found no resistance. They went right through, and they joined up with the 5th Army. And that was the end of the Enzio. That's the first time I got wounded, and I was in a lot of tough fights, but I got wounded. The only other time I got wounded, we were trying to build a bridge, and that was in December.
Did you get Purple Heart for that?
I got 2 Purple Hearts, and I thought after the first Purple Heart, I thought, gee, I was in the hospital 3 months, maybe they're going to send me home. And they didn't. And they sent me right back into combat. So the second time I got wounded, I said, this is a ticket home. And it wasn't really a bad wound, I got to say that. I was bleeding, but that's about it. And I was sitting in the hospital in Besançon, which is way back of the lines. And somebody came through the hospital and said the Germans have counterattacked, and just about anybody could walk back to their units again. So I went back to my unit.
Are these memories still pretty fresh, or are they like it was 60 years ago? Was
Certain ones. I forget some things, but some things are just like I did them yesterday. Some close friends get hit or something like that. I can remember them.
Did you lose anybody that died or obviously wounded with you? I mean, friends?
We had an awful lot of casualties. I had the best sergeants in the United States Army, the very best. There were none better, and they were draftees too. And 2 of them were killed, and the other 2 were very badly wounded. And so we were mixed in a lot of very, very busy actions. They were the finest soldiers I've known, my sergeants.
Did you stay in touch with them after the war? Or?
Yes, we still meet once a year. We have a reunion. We've been having it for the last 35 years in the same place. We meet in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And we had big numbers. We had in the hundreds. And now last year there were just, I think 14 men from the regiment plus our guests. We had about 30-some people altogether. In the whole regiment, I'm keeping the roster for the regiment, and I can only find 66 still alive. And I correspond with them several times a year.
Well, how do you feel about that? I mean, we're losing so many of you guys every day. In a matter of time, the history is going to be gone. I mean, that's why I'm doing this, by the way, is to preserve that history and to,
Well, anybody who was in it is not going to forget it, that unless he maybe didn't have anything much to do.
Yeah.
But some things you never forget. Yeah. They're very vital to me.
Do you think our country's forgetting about what happened during World War II?
No, I don't think so. At our last reunion, my regiment is now a brigade, 36 Engineer Brigade, and they're in Fort Hood, Texas. And they're a wonderful outfit. They still are. They have the same traditions we had years ago. And when we were a regiment, we had 3 battalions, and now they have 6. And our colonel come up to see us at our last reunion. Young fellow, that fellow compared to us, he looked like a boy. A wonderful guy, though, and he told us all about what's going on with the brigade today, and they haven't forgotten what we did. In fact, I was just invited down to their engineer ball next fall, and I hope I can get there.
Good. That would be great. So how many months are you in combat, and when did you eventually get out of the military?
Well, we're fighting from... Actually, I didn't start fighting till early February of '44, and we really didn't fight much after February of '45. We went into Germany, but we didn't really have any fights. We were running as fast as we could, trying to catch up to the Germans, and it was, by that time, was really over. We had some adventures. We tried. We're driving fast as we could in our cars and trucks to try to save a bridge before the Germans would blow it. And sometimes we got there fast and we saved the bridge and chased the Germans off. And sometimes we got there just after they blew it. And this was sometimes discouraging. So when you get there, when they hear the bloom explosion just before you go the last mile, you know they've got it. But it was after the war. We stayed in a nice, very nice city, beautiful city, Mittenwald in Germany, very beautiful place. But during the war, though, we had so many things to think about, and we still once in a while at our reunions, one of my old buddies will say, "Do you remember when?" And we do remember when.
Now, were you around the Battle of the Bulge?
Well, the Battle of the Bulge, according to the Army, is the Battle of the Ardennes, Alsace. And if you want to call it that, yes, I was in the Battle of the Bulge. But actually, the Bulge was only a tiny little piece of that battle. That's a very, very small place. It got its name from the movie, I'm sure. But
what, the Battle of the Bulge?
Yes, because the Bulge itself was not very big for the battlefront. It ran along for over hundreds of miles, and the fighting was all along on it. Very, very difficult in all of them. And actually, it didn't hit us until in the south. What happens is that they had to take most of our infantry divisions and move them north to fight the main thrust of the Germans. So we were pretty thin in the south. We were, in fact, the picture I gave you is in Germany when during the Germans broke down a new division from Norway. I think it was the 6th Mountain Division, and they hit us very, very hard. And they didn't get through, and that was really their last shot. We had to fight a couple of little minor actions after that, but not many, nothing, no big deals after that. after that, it was pretty settled. In fact, we went across the Rhine River on somebody else's bridge. We just took it easy, just like tourists.
What about the ending of the war? Were you around any of the concentration camps that were liberated?
Yes, after we crossed into Germany, as I said, we were heading fast south. We were really heading to the Brenner Pass, and as fast as we could go. And I think one of the things holding us up, a lot of Germans were coming toward us trying to surrender. And some of them still had their rifles. We told them to go back, go let somebody else capture you. And they chased them onto the back, let the rear echelon guys capture them. So we were going on as fast as we can. We came to after we passed Gormish and we're headed south on that road towards Mittenwald, we passed a little concentration camp of some kind. It was a small one. Only had maybe 6 barracks, I guess maybe 50 or whatever they had in the barracks. And we got there and the gate was open. Some of them were stumbling out. A couple lay dead there. And we got word back to the battalion and they told us to lock the gate and keep them in there and give them vitamins and soup and anything we could give them. Because if they got out, they're going to kill themselves. They had nothing to eat. They're all skeletons. And that's the only one we saw. We didn't do it. I went up to, what was it, Dachau. I saw Dachau about a week later, but I wasn't there during them when they opened it. We headed on south. When we got just about to Innsbruck was when they said the war's over. The war's over. And so they booked us back out of Austria back into Mittenwald.
Let's back up a second. You were at Dachau or not?
No. I visited, but I didn't. Not during the. Wasn't with them to free the thing. I think.
Did you visit it in '45 or years later? Or when?
No. All this is in '45.
Well, did you see any of the ovens?
I see. I saw the whole thing.
Tell me what you saw.
Oh, it's pretty hard to describe. It's just
I
that.
want to hear.
I don't think I saw anything worse than when I saw in Mittenwald, when I saw those poor skeletons walking around with their striped suits on. Dachau, by this time, they'd already taken most of the people out. There might have been some around, I don't remember that, but they were not there then. It was a big hellhole, but I could see nothing of the people, you know. The people were, some of these people were, I don't know how they even stood up. But their guards had left, and so they got at the gate, and as I say, a couple of them were laying there dead, because they said keep them in there till we get them some food.
Well, tell me, did you see? I mean, I've heard I've heard quite a few stories, and we've even interviewed some survivors that were in the camps. But I'm just interested in, some of them saw ovens, crematories. They saw different ways of the Germans.
I did not get to see that at all. No, I was in the place, but I just, I was on some mission to do something for somebody. I don't know what it was even. And I drove around, looked at the place, but that was it. But
well, maybe it's good you didn't see all that. I mean, I've heard some pretty horrific stories.
Oh, I'm sure it must be a terrible place.
I mean, you said hellhole. I think that's probably...
Yeah, the little place it was, yeah, this was disgusting. Disgusting. And... But the war was essentially over then. There was still a little bit of fighting, but this had to be either the very end of April or the early May. I can't remember exactly when.
It's a lot of years ago, huh?
Yes, it was. And when I come out of the service, I enlisted in the reserves. I didn't get to be a captain until I come home. And I almost joined the Pennsylvania National Guard. I was at a meeting and they offered me the job of S2. And I thought it over for a week and I thought, no, I'll stay in the reserves. And I got called up for Korea. And I went for several examinations and they kept shaking their head at me. And after the second or third or fourth doctor looked at me, he told me to go home. And that was the end of my military career.
How did the military change you as a person? Or did it?
Well, you know, they make a joke of it. They say, when you get out of OCS, they make you an officer and a gentleman. And I think most of the men respected that. It may be a joke, but outside of a few maybe bad apples, I think most of the fellows I knew tried to comport themselves as officers and gentlemen. And sometimes it wasn't easy, but it can be done. I was fortunate, though, to have the greatest platoon. Every man in there was a draftee. And I never had one man in my platoon ever run, ever. They never held back. You're going through some deep woods, they didn't disappear on you, you know, they're right there with you. I was very pleased with that.
John, tell me what freedom means to you. What does it mean for you to have freedom, to be free?
Well, I use it every bit. I don't know, I wouldn't understand what it'd be like to not to be free. And it's worth fighting for. And it's worth fighting for other people's freedom, too. I think if somebody else is being set upon by somebody else, I think it's up to us as a major country to go to their aid and help them. And I would do this again anytime.
What would you tell a young person today who's born in a free country, doesn't know what it is to not be free? How would you explain to them about the price for freedom?
It's pretty hard to know what it's being without freedom since we have the freedom. There's almost no restrictions on what we can do in this country. And I don't know if it's being appreciated entirely, especially by young people who've never had to go through a war. That I don't know. I don't know. I know my son, and I have a son and I have a grandson. My grandson's in the Coast Guard. And they understand what it's about. My son was in the Navy briefly and grandson in the Coast Guard, and they know what it's about. But I don't know whether the average high school child does. I don't know.
We try to go into schools and talk to kids about what we're doing, and that's something that I want to keep doing.
Well, the thing about it is that they don't teach anything about the war in any of the schools. I've talked to people, numerous people. In fact, when they come to reunions, I've asked these other fellows about it. None of the schools ever teach any children about any of our wars. They don't mention wars. They do not mention wars. I think that's very important. What in the world do they think made us free? And it's starting with the revolution, but all through my war and the ones after that. Everyone's important, yet they don't teach anything about it. None of the schools. I was asked to give a talk at our local grammar school some years ago. And I just mentioned some names. I mentioned Normandy, I mentioned Anzio, I mentioned Casablanca. They never heard, they didn't know there were battles. They knew there was the Second World War, but that's about it. That's it. And you know, you can't learn about a war unless you learn about the fighting in the war. That's what
Well, that's what's sad. You're right. The textbooks have hardly anything in it.
Nothing.
Anymore.
Nothing.
About World War II,
Nothing.
Korea, or even Vietnam, there's very little. So
Nothing. All they took about Vietnam is how much of a mistake it was,
and that's
which they're doing about this one war right now.
Yeah.
They don't appreciate what came out from the wars, and a great deal come out even from the Vietnam War.
What does the American flag mean and represent to you as a veteran?
What do they?
What does the flag mean to you as a veteran, the American flag?
Well, tremendous respect, and I get very annoyed when I see people desecrating it. And they say it's a matter of free speech, but it's not speech, it's action. It's action. They're desecrating our flag for which so many died. So many died. In my own regiment, we had over 300 killed and 12 or 1,300 wounded. And all those men paid a price to keep us free.
Have you been to the World War II Memorial in Washington?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I haven't. I've been. Last time I went to Washington, it hadn't been built yet, and I've been reading about it, but I hadn't been down there.
It's a good
Hadn't
thing
seen
to
it.
see. You need to go sometime.
I went back to Italy. Did I tell you? I guess I told you. I went back to Italy to. I went back overseas several times with my wife, but once I decided we're in Italy, we're going to go back and see Enzio, where I was wounded. So we rented a car and driver in Rome, and we drove down to Enzio. And outside of the town is a little town called, big town now, Borgo Piave. And I told the driver how to drive at this little road here and then this road, and I turned down another road. And I found the place where I got wounded. And I asked the driver to take my picture, and it affected me inside. And my wife was over there, and I looked over at her, and she said, "When do we eat?"
That's good. Do you think, let me ask you this. What do you think our country should remember about World War II?
Remember the men that died and what they died for. That's the best thing I can say about it.
And you're obviously proud to be a World War II veteran.
I'm very proud. In fact, it seems strange maybe, but I think it's the greatest thing I've ever done. The greatest. It was probably the toughest.
I don't think that sounds strange.
That's I get emotional when I think about it.
Can I ask what brings the emotions? Just the fact that you did?
Thinking all the people I was with. And I remember vividly one story. We were fighting in a French town called Bitch, of all things. And we were getting hit pretty hard by the Germans. And we were up it's on a mountain, side of a mountain, and each day I took a patrol out to meet up with the company next to us to make sure that we had connections in this mountainous area. It wasn't easy. And I went up 4 or 5 days in a row, maybe 5 or maybe more than that, 5 days at least. And we found it pretty easy getting up there. We never found anything. So on the 6th day, I told one of my sergeants to take the patrol up there. And I'd do something, I don't know what it was, nothing important. And he took it up, and they come back within a half hour and said he was dead. And 2 of the other fellows were with him. And I can see that today. He was a good man. He'd already been wounded twice, once before with me. And I don't like to get emotional.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. You have a lot of stories like that, things you remember?
You can't get them out of your mind. I think I'm personally responsible for that.
For that incident you described? So when you came home from the war, did you talk much about it?
Excuse me, I hate to be
You're okay.
that.
There's no problem with that.
I don't want anything like that to show up in any place. That's all right, I'm all right.
Well, when you came home from the war, did you talk much about it at that time?
Not for a while. I went back to work. I was home. I was back to work within 6 days from the time I come home. I went back to the same company I was with. They gave me a nice promotion. They were a very good company. They sent 10% of my pay to my family all the time I was home. And all the time I was away, they sent me 10% of the pay. It wasn't a hell of a lot at that time, but it was certainly something. And So I stayed working for a while, and I was busy getting used to being a civilian, so I wasn't thinking much about the war at that time. I had to go to reserve meetings, but nothing showed up until the Korean War started coming along.
Well, I'm going to ask you to do something at the end of my interviews. I ask all veterans to do this. I'm going to ask you to give me a salute into the camera when I ask you. Is that okay from where you're seated?
You know, I can't sit down and do it.
Well, the camera won't go up any higher than that.
Well, I have to.
Can you? Everybody sits. If you saw the one end of my films, you'd be. And really, when you're looking at this, you can't tell. So
Or shall I look at you or the
I'm going
camera?
to have you look right in there. When I tell you to, I'm going to ask you to just give me a salute. Okay, sir, go ahead. Great.